This is Ben Doughty for the hardest game at the iconic Fisher Boxing Club in Bermondsey with my old mate Peter McDonagh. What's happening?
How you doing, mate? Hope you're well, Ben, and I hope all your viewers are well. And I can see you're doing a great job on the hardest game. Like I say, a real, honest, YouTube channel, in my opinion.
Well, you've always had. We're here because you're the head coach and have been for several months or maybe over a year now at the Fisher Boxing Club, which is basically you come in full circle where it all began for you, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like I say, travelled the world, had more trainers than JD Sports, but I only had one teacher, in my opinion. I learnt a lot of them. I don't take back what I learnt of certain coaches, trainers, whatever we want to call certain people. But I learnt nearly all my craft by the teacher, Steve Iser, the Alex Ferguson of amateur boxing, in my opinion.
You have a very forthright opinion on who should be coaching and who shouldn't be coaching, and I know you feel quite passionately about the fact you often liken professional boxing to the Wild West, insofar as you believe anybody can come into it suddenly out of nowhere with very dubious background on the coaching or the managerial promotional side. Again,
I want to reiterate about more trainers than JD Sports, but I will say some of them trainers, no disrespects, have not got a clue, in my opinion. I will say, going back to what I'm saying about you said about it's different. In what industry, in any industry, do you not have to do, an apprenticeship? How people can go from becoming a professional boxing coach and not going through the amateurs. I'm on about not you ain't even got to have boxed. I'm not about you've got to have boxed, no. Because we've had trainers in the past, a lot of trainers, Customato and other trainers.
Yeah. You've got guys like Customato or Ray Arcel and Angelo Dundee who didn't box physically themselves, and you've had also fighters who've boxed at a very high level like Lloyd Honeyghan and even Prince Nassim Hamed who haven't really excelled when they've turned their hand to that coaching role, perhaps for a variety of different reasons.
Shout out Lloyd Honeyghan, he comes from the Fisher Club. As I say, my teacher Steve Iser trained him as well. Yeah, well, you're 100% right. As I say, I think it's the only sport out there where people can literally creep in overnight and get a place within professional boxing. And i.e., we had this conversation the other day on the phone about, matchmaking and all that sort of stuff. Why don't they keep it simple? When we say about starting at grassroots, why don't they keep it simple, like medical cards in the amateurs? He's had that many wins, he's had that many losses, the way to matchmake fights. The problem in professional boxing is they say it's a business. I think it's rubbish, because I think we're ruining the business because you've got a load of fighters. We've got Olympians fighting journeymen in their first or second fight.
That's interesting you raised that issue, because yesterday at the press conference, the final presser for Benn versus Eubank Jr, a fella who was previously unknown to me until yesterday, called Rick Reno, who is the chief operating officer of the Ring magazine, I believe, now. He was centre stage in the middle holding the ring belt. God knows why he was holding the ring belt, by the way, because those two certainly aren't fighting for it, to the best of my knowledge. But he said, I would like to make it clear from the outset, this is not a matchroom promotion, this is not a boxer promotion. We've seen a lot of shit over the years being, masquerading as shows, and we're here to basically eradicate that and change the whole guard. So he was almost saying what you're saying, although he appears to have come from nowhere himself, at least in terms of my cognizance.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of, ring belts, just like there's plenty of rings, We get a sovereign ring, and then we get a diamond ring, don't we? So I don't know. Like you say, a lot of it's made up. Everyone seems to be. There's got to be a belt if there's a fight. We all know the product is what sells the fight out. And what we find with Eubank and Benn, it's not them, it's their fathers, where it's moved on, and now they're saying it's history. So it's very well sellable. Just like, they're trying to pull Fury out of retirement to fight Joshua. I mean, we're in a sad state of affairs when a man wants to retire and he feels like, his health is more important and his family are more important. And we've got so-called, what they call reporters. What would you call them? Reporters?
Well, you'd call them content creators, interviewers.
Yeah, YouTubers, whatever you want to call them. Again, we're getting them coming out of the woodwork. Well, I don't even say that. One of the men that's come out of the woodwork, I'll say Adam Smith. I'm not being funny, but he's been in boxing a lot of years. I respect Adam. I think Adam's quite a good commentator, in my opinion. But I think you should keep your opinion to yourself on things like that, because if there's a serious injury, if Fury comes back just for the sake of coming back for the money, fighting Joshua and gets injured, it's not good. So I think he should sail away to the sunset now with his family and live a happy life. He's got enough money. I don't think it's going to do any of them any better, apart from their bank balance, that fight happening.
Have you spoken to Tyson Fury in recent weeks?
No, I've not spoken to Tyson. He's living family life now. I'm back in boxing in the thick of it, and I think all I'll talk about if I was talking to him would be about boxing.
So somebody that was doing the rounds last couple of weeks, a video of him doing some sort of leg press type exercise, and he's talking about the WBC King is returning, which is a bit eccentric because he's not the WBC King. We know who the heavyweight champion of the world is in every aspect, really. But is that Fury hinting at a comeback himself? I mean, is that I couldn't ascertain when the video was shot, but people were representing it to me like it was current.
There's reasons, why he might come back. If it's about his mental health and he feels like he just wants to get back in shape and he's bored of what he's doing. I'm not his dad. I can't tell him what to do, or I can't control him. But for me, I think he's done a great job for British boxing, just like Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's done an amazing job. I think they both had their day, and I think for both of them, I think if they hang up the gloves now, they've done great for British boxing. But interesting. I mean, hitting a bag, it's a comeback. Doing a leg press, that's a very unusual comeback, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as I say, I was unable to ascertain exactly when the video was shot, but I think it was Isham Pickering first sent it to me as if it was some kind of hint at a Fury return. I mean, if you were a betting man, I know you've got a great strike rate with predicting fights. I can vouch for that because you've called a lot of fights right on the nose. If you were having a bet on Fury fighting again or not fighting again, where do you think you would place the money?
What, if he fights Joshua?
No. I just mean, if someone said, will he ever fight again or not? Just a straight bet.
Yeah, 100% he's going to fight again. 100% he's going to fight again. You can see by his mentality he's going to fight again. Like I say, he ain't been out of the public eye for 3 months and he's already talking about the return. So, but again, it's down to him. I wish him the best of luck. We're going to go on to the subject in a minute in trainers, and I'll have my same aspect on that. But what I will say is this, Ben. When you spoke about the Ring Man magazine, yeah, for me, like the geezer that was holding the belt, right? So I say the geezer that was holding the belt, I don't know who he is. I've put 40 years into this game, 41 years I've been involved in boxing. And like I say, he's not the first person that's walked in overnight, and he's not going to be the last person. I mean, we've got managers with Olympians, we've got who have never ever... I like to say lace the glove, but I want to say lace the glove, not in the sense of boxing, but... not even put a glove on. You
spoke the other day about Dean Powell, who never boxed, to the best of my knowledge, but he was someone who served a very long apprenticeship around the gyms. He was at the Thomas of Beckett. He was at Dudley ABC, where he said he was influenced by a great coach called Ronnie Brown there. He shadowed Jimmy Tibbs, I believe, upon request at the Royal Oak. Yeah. He was the man at the Thomas of Beckett who'd be there, first guy in the gym and last guy to leave, and he wasn't above sweeping the floors and doing maintenance. So you could say that Dean Powell, even some people would still... I remember Barry McGuigan said once, I respect Dean Powell, but he's never taken a punch in his life. Yeah. When they had a disagreement about how a fight had ended. And, you could say that, and people did say that, but he did serve, he was a proper boxing person, was he not?
100%, and, my head's standing up on the back of my neck, because Dean Powell, I had arguments with him as well as, worked well with Dean Powell, and, God rest his soul, and like I say, rest in peace, Dean. He's a great loss to the game, to boxing. And I'll tell you what...
Was he a straight shooter?
100%, and I've even been paid personally out of his own bank account, for certain things. And what I will say is this, straight up now, that he used to wipe the spit off the floor in the Thomas of Beckett, Not only did he used to do that, I think he lived at the Thomas of Beckett for a while when he come down from up north.
Almost certainly he probably did, because there was accommodation above the pub, and it wouldn't surprise me that he moved in. He was, because you know what, my dad wasn't convinced by him. He saw this funny little Brummie guy who assumed a role of a certain amount of importance and would be giving advice and dispensing it to random people, including a young lad we brought there who was looking at doing a bit of boxing. And my dad was not too sure about him. Next minute, he saw him all the time in the corner, you know, Ben Watson, Ben Eubank, you know, he saw him working all these big occasions on ITV and latterly Sky. And my dad was like, you know, fair play to him. I don't know how he's done it, but he's done it somehow. So God knows what my old man would make of today's scene, but by his kind of filter, he thought Dean was a bit of a gatecrasher at the time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can say that, especially when the person ain't boxed, you know. But it's an easy way to sell someone out and say they ain't boxed. But I'll tell you what, you know, I'm more educated than that to turn around and say someone ain't boxed, blah, blah, blah. But listen, it's an education. The problem today is, right, there's no education, because what people are doing today is they're looking on the internet, they're swearing blind that it's true and it's real, and what we're finding is so-and-so's coming to the game. I'm not going to sit and dig one person out, not that I want to dig people out, but because I'll say it as it is, but, you know, I was a car salesman, right, no experience whatsoever, right, and all of a sudden they're looking after top pros and Olympians and whatever, or they're doing a great job for them. I'm not being funny. It ain't hard to do a great job for someone if you're doing something for someone in boxing, because most people don't do nothing for nobody in boxing. So most managers don't do nothing.
Do you know what? I'll tell you a little anecdote. There's a girl that I know who I met her in a white collar situation, and then she obviously was too good for that scene, and then she had a few amateur fights. Then when she joined the police force, she was able to. I probably shouldn't have said about the police force because it's giving it away too much. So I don't want to be too specific about this thing yet, but. Long story short, she got a job which allowed her to pursue boxing more. She won some national titles in the amateurs, and now she's 3-0 and looking to get out. She was looking at boxing recently on a show up in the northeast, and long story short, it was looking like it was going to cost about $4,500 just to get an opponent in the ring. She's a professional boxer, normally, you know, presumably trying to earn money amongst other things from that. I mean, obviously people have aspirations and ambitions as well, which are non-monetary, but. It was going to cost her $4,500 to get this import opponent in the ring for a 6-rounder. I mean, how jacked up is that situation?
100%. You turn professional in any other aspect of life, whether it's playing snooker or playing darts, you're going to at least get £300. Some of these fighters today, they don't get a penny. You know, they end up having to pay the purse, and they end up they owe money out.
Yeah.
The amount of fighters that end up when they retire, they end up with nothing. Now, for me, my reasoning would be speaking to them. My reason would be, what do we call it? You know, if you ain't got nothing as an amateur, or I don't see the potential in you to do something as a pro. I don't see the point in doing it.
Dave Boy Green always said his manager, Mr. Smith, as he called him, wouldn't turn you over unless he thought you at least had the potential to win a British title, credibly speaking. Yeah. Whereas now, I mean, you know, I see one fellow who turned pro with Steve Goodwin many years ago, 12 years ago maybe, who got stopped in the first round of both of his fights. He was trying to go on the road. He knew he couldn't sell tickets. He was from the West Country, and he came up and he boxed a couple of people. He was in the away corner, and he got done in the first round both times. Obviously, shouldn't have turned pro. Wasn't ready for it. Wasn't ready for that kind of you know. That kind of situation, really wasn't ready for that territory, but it wouldn't happen back in the day, no doubt.
No, 100%, and we like to say the word journeyman, right? I mean, it's very easily used that he's a good journeyman, or he's a journeyman. I can't see not many journeymen today, if there's one decent journeyman today, right? Because for me, we had journeymen who was ABA finalists, ABA champions.
The Jordan Granham?
Yeah, but I mean, what you're doing, Ben, it's like you turning around going, right, who are we looking at here? Canelo, Crawford. We can name on our hand how many decent fighters are out there. Come on, let's be real.
I still think we have a lot of elite talent and some remarkable fighters operating today. But what I feel is they're denied the chance to establish that greatness that fighters of yesteryear were able to. Some of them were able to establish. I gave you the example on the phone, I think, last night, where I said Marvin Hagler reigned for 7 years, from September 1980 to April 1987. He won the undisputed title from Alan Minter, and he lost it effectively, although only WBC was on the line, versus Sugar Ray Leonard in April 1987. Take Gennady Golovkin, who roughly had an 8-year middleweight supreme reign also from, I believe it was about 2010 to 2018 when he lost the second fight to Canelo. Yeah. Now, it's very difficult to figure out when Gennady became the middleweight champion of the world, because he won an interim, then a regular, then it was upgraded, and so on and so on. And there were also, I believe Steve Bunce said a few years ago, I saw this come back as a memory on Facebook, Steve Bunce said that 18 men who've also claimed to be the world middleweight champion in the reign of Gennady Golovkin. So, do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Golovkin is a great fighter, but he's boxing, he was operating in a different ecosystem, which tends to detract from potential greatness.
It's more of an electric system than a diesel system, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the truth of it. The electric runs out a lot quicker than what the diesel does. Do you know what I mean? Where the diesel, Hagler runs, all them, they all reigned longer than champions today with decent fighters in front of them.
Yeah, or else they didn't, simply because...
There was decent fighters there.
I always look at the example of Alan Minter wins the title in Las Vegas against Vito Antuofermo, one defence against Antuofermo, then loses to Marvin Hagler. Jim Watt manages to put 4 defences together, quite an easy title win, a vacant title against Alfredo Pichuala, but loses it to the great Alexis Arguello. Maurice Hope manages to make 3 WBC title defences at light middleweight before he runs into the great Wilfred Benitez. Colin Jones gets 2 shots, one at Milton McCrory, who was a very good fighter, another Donald Curry, who was a borderline great fighter, so he doesn't get there. Tony Simpson gets the shot against Marvin Hagler, which he's obviously can't. There's no way Simpson wouldn't be a world champion today. Maybe several times over. So I always look at how quickly British fighters used to lose those world championships because it was tough at the top. You know what I mean? It was that difficult. Whereas now you can sit on a title for a good 10 defences these days with good management and matchmaking.
100%. I'll tell you, I think could have done a lot better than what he done. Although he done amazing, was Joe Kawasaki.
I was going to say with Joe was a great fighter. He is a light middleweight all-time great, and he is a British all-time great. But I don't suppose it's a coincidence that his 21 title defence reign of the WBO super middleweight title came in that era when we had the situation I was talking about. If he'd had to be the best from the very outset, if he'd had to be someone like a Roy Jones or a James Toney instead of a Chris Eubank Jr, who was a comeback in Chris Eubank Sr, then it might have been a different story, right, for Joey. But he wouldn't have put the Joe Lewis type stats together, I don't suppose.
Again, for me, records are for DJs, and we're not interested in that anyway, because for me, exactly what you've just said there. Would he have beat Roy Jones in his prime? I argue he wouldn't have beat Roy Jones in his prime. And that ain't putting Joe Kawasaki down for what he done. Do you know what I mean? Would he have beaten Bernard Hopkins in his prime?
It's funny with Hopkins, because Hopkins can't possibly have been in his prime at 43 years old, I believe he was when he fought Joe, but neither was he washed up. Right. Yeah, Roy, I would say, was washed up and was a shadow of what he had been. Hopkins, it's a very strange case of a guy that seemed to... people talk about fine wine maturation process. I think Bernard did seem to get better as he got smarter. And I know an American boxing writer once made this analogy that if you're looking at the legacies of Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins, it comes down to a choice between the body and the brain. Roy was the body with the amazing reflexes and the Superman-type athletic qualities when he was right on point. And when he lost a few steps, it was quite disastrous for him in some fights. Whereas Hopkins became this mature box of boxing wisdom and tricks. Yeah. So he was the brain, and that was what his legacy was based on, whereas Roy was more about his athletic qualities.
We could also argue that Roy Jones got caught on steroids, and Joe Kawasaki never, he'd never been thing for it, or neither was Bernard Hopkins, which comes to another case that Eubank getting trained by Roy Jones. That was an interesting case, and then to say what he said about Conor Benn.
Yeah, to remind people, for the sake of the interview, what he said about Conor Benn.
What do you mean what he said about Conor Benn? Oh, about the Peds?
Yeah.
Well, he said, you're a cheat. You know what I mean? He said, I've walked these streets for the last 2 months. You've been away. You've hidden away. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, that was a masterclass what he's done about the AMRAPs with Billy Joe Saunders. Because Billy Joe will go in there and wind him up as well.
Billy Joe will go in there and wind him up. He won't do it deadpan. Billy Joe will. But I think Eubank is a pretty cool character. I think he's pretty icy in his kind of mindset. I don't think it'll discombobulate Eubank, but it's a nice touch.
I'll tell you what is interesting. Will Billy Joe be able to do it? Will he get his licence in time to be able to do it? Because I wonder if you have to have a licence to go in the
Listen, so far as I know, Billy Joe is a licensed manager, so he's already got the border control.
Yeah, I didn't know he's licensed. Yeah, he's licensed. He's sweet. He's in there, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's in there, and he's like, he will get under his skin. We know what he's like. He's a wind-up, isn't he?
Yeah.
But do you know what, though? Eubank might take it cool and collective. Do you know what? They might end up having a laugh in the changing room.
I wouldn't rule it out, you know. I wouldn't rule it out by any stretch. But moving towards the big fight on Saturday, and I've got to say, I know it's commercially huge. To me, it's not anything more or less than an intriguing fight. I'm interested. I bought it on DAZN yesterday. I'm looking forward to watching it. I'm finding it hard to call, to be honest with you. But I have this sneaking feeling, Peter, that it might actually go 12 rounds and there might be a controversial decision at the end of it. Yeah,
you could be right. And yeah, 100%. I mean, it's one of them fights where you're going to sit on the fence to a degree. I'm not going to sit on the fence. I never do sit on the fence. But it is a tough fight to call because one's killing himself to make weight. The other ones, and you know what? I've seen body language as well from Eubank, and I tell you what I've noticed with Eubank. Again, I told you, to a degree, I watch everything in someone's body language and everything, and he keeps blinking. He's blinking a lot, of which I've noticed.
Which hints at dehydration.
Dehydration. It could be dehydration. It could be a lack of water going to the brain.
I think that's the same thing.
Yeah. But I'm not. Listen, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying. I'll just say I look at body language. That's how I don't predict fights all the time on, what the result records of people are, or I look at their body language when it comes. People say, when are you going to put your prediction out? I said today after I see them on the scales, I'm going to look at the prediction. Well, I'll go home and watch that.
So for the sake of clarity, you're waiting for today's weigh-in, which, they've had it already, They've already had it. I actually heard Benn came in at 154.6, by the way. But Eubank hadn't weighed in at the time. That's what a fellow called Gav Wright on the Facebook page told me this morning. As you know, they have a ceremonial weigh-in much later now. They're having it at 6 o'clock tonight in Islington at the Business Design Centre. I don't want to distract you from the main point that we were talking about, but what do you think about these ceremonial weigh-ins when they're actually weighing in behind closed doors now?
Everything's behind closed doors. Contracts are behind closed doors. Everything's behind closed doors. I think they should be open. Do you know what makes you laugh about these big fights? They chuck the purses out there and show what these big fights are getting. Go on a Goodwin show at York Hall and see what their purses are. I think everything should be open. I think everything should be. I'm not digging Steve out. He's doing a great job. He's trying to just get fighters out. I'm not disputing that. But I'm saying I think every fighter's purse should be put out there because I ain't got to say much more. But there's not much going on in Saudi at the moment, is there? I've noticed.
No, I think we were in a transitional phase for the last 18 months at least with world boxing and Turkey Al Sheikh and the infiltration. And then he announced the collaboration with Dana White, which is another game changer. So now, we've got those big shows, like in May the 2nd, you've got the big New York show. You've got Canelo and William Skull. Also, I think it's May the 3rd. And I believe you've got Inoue fighting like May the 4th, I think it is. It's going to be like a mega blockbuster weekend next weekend in May. But I think we're still waiting to see where the dust settles and the chips fall from the new... we've seen the WBC Grand Prix over the last several days last week as well, but quite where Turkey and Dana White are going with this and what reverberations it will have on the previously, newly revitalised Queensberry and Matchroom, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on there. Like, I thought he's come in, he's shaking the game up a little bit. I think he's something to do with this weekend, hasn't he?
Well, certainly he has something to do with it. It's a Ring magazine promotion. According to Rick Reno yesterday, he said this is not a boxer promotion. This is not a Matchroom promotion. Turkey Al Sheikh owns the Ring magazine, so he absolutely has something to do with it. And they're parading the belt, as we already discussed.
Yeah, parading the belt. Again, we can argue it as proper boxing fans and purists. Are we defrauding his belt? I know it's not the Ring magazine belt, the real Ring magazine belt, but is it defrauding it, having it for this fight? Listen, for me, do you know what this should be for? For me, 100%, this should be for a British title.
Southern area.
British title, right? Let's not look beyond that, right? We talk about Eubank Benn years ago, right? From that era onwards, I think boxing's become diluted. I become a pro after that, and I can say it was diluted from after the 90s. I think it's become a lot more diluted.
The issue in this instance is that presumably there's already a British middleweight champion, and I should know who it is, and so should you. But I think unless we have to have a little think about it now, we possibly can't recall who the British middleweight champion is right now. It was Tyler Denny, right? And then he had the European Championship as well. I believe Tyler had them both, but he certainly lost the European title to Hamza Shiraz, and I'm not sure where the status of the British middleweight title remains right now, but somebody presumably lays claim to it as we speak.
Yeah. Or make another British belt. I'm not saying wrestling belt, but make another, British.
Well, no, I don't think we need to make any more belts. I think we've got enough belts.
No, but they said, listen, I'm going to lose a bit of weight soon, and I need a belt for my trousers. No, but I don't know. Listen, maybe relinquish. Get the British champion to relinquish it. Give him a few quid and let's them fight.
Yeah, but this is then we're in the realm of what we're talking about, of having belts to promote fights and represent fights. When really,
what are we going to give him then? Well, I know we shouldn't have to give him a belt. It shouldn't be about a belt. It shouldn't be,
and it isn't, because they're not getting one. I thought that was
ring back of his belt.
Yeah, but are they actually going to win that, or was that just that guy Rick Reno standing there with it?
Who's going to give it to him? Him, Rick Reno.
I've no idea, to be honest. I'd never heard of Rick Reno until yesterday. Then I see he went on the offensive. Steve Lillis, who's a very fine man, told me he's a good guy. A few other people were telling me that they weren't so sure about him. But he apparently created Vegas boxing scene. I don't know if that's the same as boxing scene, the well-known journalistic website that Trish Dixon now heads up.
Yeah, but Ben, I'm a good guy. Yeah, I would have held the belt.
Yeah.
Let me hold the belt.
And since when should it be about that anyway? Eddie Hearn seemed to usher the promoter in the middle kind of thing. He seemed to usher that kind of thing in, where it was very much about the promoter being very visible and up front. I don't recall... Frank Warren used to do it, to be fair, in publicity photos. I don't recall seeing Mickey Duff standing between the two protagonists ever. Don King would have done it.
Yeah, but you say Don King. Listen, I'm not disputing that. Why is there 4 million people in front of Eddie Hearn? I don't understand that. And Rick Reno, whatever his name is, he's in front of it. Everyone's in front of it. You got there's one promoter promoting the fight. I know we've got multiple promoters, but or the man himself, the man that is putting the money in. Turkey O'Shake, put him up the front. At least we know he's putting some readies in.
Well, we've seen quite a lot of exposure for Turkey, hadn't we? And presumably, some of it must be a vanity project for Turkey, as well as the agenda for his own country uplift, and some people call it sports washing. I don't really want to get into that, but. Turkey is a big boxing fan, and some of it must be living out a dream for himself as well. The fact he's been photographed with so many fighters centre stage in the time he's been involved in the game and the time he's turned it on its head.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything now, isn't it? Your face on the camera all the time, it can either make you or break you, can't it? We've seen that with what's his name, the geezer who does it, it's YouTube geezer. What's his name? He's always banged up.
He's always banged up.
He's always banged up, isn't he? The Romanian. What's his name? What's his name? The Tate.
Oh, Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate. But I'm saying though, Tommy Robinson, all these, it can make you or break you. And Turkey O'Shake, it's the same difference of him. So once he starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I know he's big to us, the boxing people, but other people, then people might not like it, and they're trying to push him down. Sometimes you're better off sitting behind the camera sometimes, aren't you?
Well, Al Heyman, that was always his approach, to be practically invisible and enigmatic.
Yeah, it's the same as a geezer. I've been watching Love Box. Have you seen that Love Box?
Can't say I have.
Two comedians, right? And there's another one there. All you can see is his hands. Just a pair of white gloves on his hands. Yeah, 3 black geezers, but one of them's got their hands like that, right? But no, even the people that go on the show, the guests, have to watch it. Even the people that go on the show, the guests, they don't know who he is because he's only got his eyes showing. But it's good. It's good because people are trying to work out who he is. Is he young? Is he old? You know what I mean?
You know what? There's a certain advantage to anonymity when you're actually operating in certain areas, especially boxing. I could see that. I mean, personally, I've always been very visible. So you're there for the detractors and trolls or whatever you want to call them to shoot at you. Whereas sometimes you think if people didn't know who I was and they just knew the channel and the brand and they didn't really associate it with a person or with a face, then that might be an easier ride sometimes. But let's talk a little bit about the rest of the card. And I want to talk to you about something else too. I saw Paul Smith on Twitter yesterday basically having a pop at Tunde Ajayi because Tunde was doing the kind of pad work that he always does with Anthony at these show workouts. And Paul Smith tweeted, "Tunde's been waiting for this moment his whole life. you know. But and then somebody called Adam Brooks from GB News said, "Oh, he's a lovely fella," and then Paul Smith went, "He might be to you. He's not. He's a fraud." And I remember I was thinking, why does Paul Smith even care what kind of pads Tunde is doing with Anthony Yard? And why, if you were Paul Smith, why would you bother entering into that fray and attaching yourself to that? You might say it to your mate. You might call me sometimes and say something about someone you wouldn't say on camera, not because you're afraid to. You just don't see the point, I imagine. So, what's your take on that? About, you know, obviously we can segue into the Anthony Yard Linden Arthur third fight, but that was my kind of something that caught my attention yesterday was Paul Smith having a go at Tunde with a lot of vitriol.
I mean, let's forget about the card on Saturday night. I'm not interested in the card on Saturday night. I'm interested in what you're talking about here, because for me, you know, we're talking as boxing purists to a degree, and you know, like what Paul Smith said, we're living in a world now where everybody likes to be seen on camera. Everybody likes to have validation of what they've done and what they ain't done. For me, I just want to sweep my side of the street. I was too busy sweeping the other side of the street. You know, oh, what about that coach? What about this coach? I think every coach has got their own way. And for me, what I believe and what I learned off the master himself, Steve Isa, is if you get in a fighter's head, irrelevant how you hold the pads, irrelevant how you do certain things in the gym, listen, you can either fight or you can't fight. And I'll tell you what I'll do with every coach out there. I will expose every single person, because I always say it. It's who walks through that door. They've got to walk through that door. You can give them a bit of advice and you can show them the grounding. But again, we get these people. I'm a pro coach. It's different, an amateur coach and a pro coach. Let me tell you something. If you teach a kid or a boy or a girl how to hold their feet, yeah, and move their feet properly, hold their hands up, yeah, that's what I call teaching. That's what I call a proper coach, yeah. All these so-called people that are getting Olympians, yeah, off the back of nothing, or people they know, yeah. Do you know what I mean?
You know, my friend Michael Alajade has said previously that one of the kind of hustles in the pro game is to get an amateur top prospect, you know, or a world-class achieving amateur like an Olympic medalist, and to try and convince them that their amateur coach can't take them any further. And they were great for that part of the journey, but now they need a different coach who can take them to the next level. And he said that's the biggest con out there.
Yeah, 100% it's the biggest con out there. Because what are they actually going to teach? Turn that down a minute, please.
Yeah, we could do without that.
Turn that down. Turn it off.
Sorry.
Go on then. Cut it then.
Yeah, go on.
Let me look. My friend Michael Alajade has said this before. He says that one of the big hustles in the pro game is they get a world-class achieving amateur like an Olympic medalist, and they try to convince him or her that the amateur coach can't take them any further, because they were brilliant for that part of the journey, but in order to progress in the paid ranks, they need to make adjustments and they need another coach, which he says is the biggest con going.
Well, the first thing I'd ask is, what is the professional coach's CV? What have they done? What have they produced? What are they going to do? What are they going to produce? So for me, it's very, very hard to see a fighter at a top level being ruined. Yeah? Like,
Tony Jeffries thinks he was, I don't know about ruined, but he says, I wish I'd have listened to my amateur coaches. I wish I'd have kept my amateur style.
Yeah, 100%. Because pro game ain't no different. It's boxing. It's just longer rounds.
Longer fights, yeah.
Yeah, and a few tricks and longer rounds. Do you know what I mean? But I was learning how to elbow. I was learning how to, move the arm, twist the arm, mess the arm around, you know, use my head, do this in the amateurs. I was learning at 10 years old.
Jamie Branch said that, you know, he won a bunch of titles as a junior and probably a few senior titles as an amateur before he turned over. I know he turned over young, but he was a prodigy in the amateurs for the Repton. Yeah. And he said in the pros, I think he lost his debut, then he won one and drew one. He had a bad time of it in the pros. He was very disillusioned. And he said, the best coaches are here. They were at the Repton. They were like Tony Burns and George Obwell. You know, he said they were the best coaches. He said the pro game, they haven't got two ideas to rub together, and you know, and he said a lot of it, they think it's about conditioning and toughness and all the rest of it. He said, but everything I learned about boxing was at a Repton amateur club.
Yeah, no, what I will say is this: who's the most successful amateur? Who's the most successful professional out there at the moment?
In the entire world?
Yes.
Probably Saul Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, or Alexander Usyk.
Or Alexander Usyk. Yeah,
it's started with his amateur coach, and he's with his amateur coach still now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And you look at these Eastern European fighters, elite fighters like Usyk and Bivol and they still have the same kind of amateur style. You look at when they do pads, they do a lot of in and out kind of stuff, don't they, and a lot of bounce. And Bivol still trains exactly like that from what I can see, and so does Alexander, I think.
100%, yeah. So Ben, I have to leave this year because I want to get on and train these, yeah? Is that right?
Yeah, well, there you go. At some point, it has to end somewhere, and the whole point is that we're talking about authenticity and commitment, and now you've actually got a job to do. So, Peter McDonagh, always a pleasure. We talk again soon. Thank you very much.
Good, man, nice one. Thank you very much.